if you're here, you're probably the coolest people in this school, right?
For sure.
I think you are, because this is where the cool people should be. I think, to piggyback, Manny mentioned Rudolf Wurlitzer. I think that everybody in here should do themselves a favor and look up Robert Frank. Robert Frank was a photographer, and some of his, he wrote, he made a book of photography called The Americans. And it is a beautiful, beautiful book that kind of tells a story on every page. So like, if you're checking out the Rudolf Wurlitzer thing, definitely check out Robert Frank. Anyway, my book it does that thing that Manny had talked about, his having a genre. This one really does not. This book is more just about people doing things. There's no bad guys, there's no good guys. I call it dark humor, so you could also call it transgressive fiction. You can also just call it lit fic. All of these things make it very hard for me to find a genre on Amazon. It makes it very hard to sell it. However, if you find the right channels and you work hard enough at it, which I do, you can find a market for yourself. And that's, for me, it's not really about finding a market. It's more about just having written, and then to continue writing, which actually I didn't do. I think I always started, and we'll get to this later, but I always sat down and started writing Larry and Paul. Larry and Paul was two characters I had in my head. They're based on people I know, and I always wanted to write about them. So for years, I would sit down and write Larry and Paul are doing something, right? And I figured this was gonna be the start of something beautiful. I could never put a story around it. I read these guys' books. I got into Manny from another author who was published by a friend of mine. And so I read, this guy's name is Duvet Knox. He's extremely cool. He's a little bit dirty, but he's extremely cool. That's how I got into Manny's books in the Nevada. And I read their books and I became inspired. And being inspired to write was something I was never, a long time ago I was inspired to write by a lot of really cool authors. I read a lot of stuff like Kerouac and Ginsberg and stuff. So like, to fall into some books that like actually resonate with me now was really important for me, impactful, and made me want to write. So I sat down, and the story of this woman who just leaves on a whim, leaves everything behind, and leaves her partner to pick up the pieces with their friends. So it follows my lead character, Lily, on a trip south to Mexico, and then it sticks with the characters back home who are trying to figure out what happened to her. So I think Manny described it as little vignettes, which is kind of what it is. It's easy to read. Each chapter is its own little thing. I'm not a very good reader. So for me, if I can get through a chapter and find myself satisfied before I fall asleep, I feel much better about it. So that's kind of how it's written for me, basically. But I'll go ahead and read you guys, and I'll start with Larry and Paul since I made mention of it. By the way, Waffle House, I'm from Michigan. We don't have these things. So when I put this on the cover, I made mention a few times of Lily, the gal, stopping into Waffle Houses on her way down south. So for me, this is like a magical thing, like a place of wonder, So now I'm here and I'm seeing them like every 3 feet. There's one like right next to my hotel room. I can't wait. Let's see. So we'll start with Larry and Paul. Larry and Paul got up in the morning, threw on the clothes they'd worn the day before, and heeled their way to the old gas station for their daily 2-liter Mountain Dew, and to catch up on the neighborhood news. The gas station was a relic, a shed of a building with an angled front face. The bathroom was located not inside, but on the outside of the building, and required a key that would dangle off a little old wooden-handled plunger. Inside, the store was dirty, with paint peeling off the walls, shelves stocked with more candy bars, honey buns, and Little Debbie cakes than any fire code should allow. The attendant, a young guy wearing a Ramones t-shirt, a blue smock, earrings, and nail polish, was always excited to hear the neighborhood gossip from these two corn dogs. "How are you guys doing this morning?" smiled our young attendant while scratching off his inevitably losing lottery ticket. "Great," Larry said with his usual enthusiasm. Larry happened to be a big fan of the old wrestler Hacksaw Jim Duggan. You guys probably don't know who Hacksaw Jim Duggan is, do you?
I don't
This relationship with Hacksaw was what prompted Larry to hold an invisible 2x4 over his shoulder while crossing his eyes and sticking out his tongue as he greeted you. Larry, like Hacksaw, was a tree of a man with a very long, unkempt beard. He could appear intimidating at first, but within 3 seconds of talking to him, it became quite obvious he wouldn't hurt a fly. Both Larry and Paul were originally from the rural up north, and they had been placed down here in the city by their mother. They probably shared a room in an AFC home here in the neighborhood, but nobody really knew if it was an actual AFC home or not. "Last night the liquor store got robbed," muttered Paul. He was quiet, skinny, and probably had the same rat tail for 30 years. He had a pencil-thin gray mustache and a mousy little voice that you had to strain to hear when he spoke. Paul was the exact opposite of Larry in almost every way. It would be nearly impossible for one to assume they were brothers. "Yeah, the liquor store got robbed for real," he, bellowed Larry with an even bigger smile. "Better them than me," our gas station attendant said. "Heck yeah," said Paul. "Heck yeah," shouted Larry. He had a tendency to start an exclamation on the upswing and bring it down from there. So that was my two characters that will appear over and over again as kind of a constant. Now, the reason Larry and Paul are in this thing is because they are the purest form of innocence. These are pretty dark people on the outside, but on the inside they would never hurt a fly. And it's the kind of people you really need to help you level yourself in life, because those are the people that would truly hurt no one. They're not in it for anything. So to give you a little sense of the humor, we'll move on one more little short thing here. Back in Tulsa, this is Lily's on her trip, and she stumbles into some characters who decide to try and flirt with her. Back in Tulsa, Juan and Diego were lying in hospital beds in the same room. So I told you they tried to flirt with her, and that's where they ended up. Back in Tulsa, Juan and Diego were lying in hospital beds in the same room. They were frustrated, while a couple of cops questioned them as both suspects and victims. Meanwhile, Miguel and Luis sat on a small bench near the window. "You didn't know the woman with the knife?" asked one of the cops. "Man, I'd never seen her before. I already said this." Juan was sore and anxious. "Why are you in here with us when I already..." The boy's mother suddenly burst in through the door. "¿Qué le pasa a mi chicos?" Pardon my Spanish. "¿Por qué te metes con esas gringas?" Manny, correct me if you need to. "I tell you all the time not to mess with white girls." "Ma'am," cop number 2 interjects, "if you could, and you call yourself police and you stand here and treat my sons as though they are criminals here. You should be ashamed of yourself. Can you not see that they are victims? You are totally ignorant to their wounds. Crazy gringa stabs my boy, another shoots my other boy, and all you cops can do is accuse them because they are Mexicano. Why don't you go get the people that do this?" "Ma'am, I am Mexican." "You are policia. Go get this chica and leave my boys alone." "Mama, it's okay," Miguel chimes in. "They're just doing their job. And you, my son, you should have called me the minute you knew about this. Por el amor de Maria. How did I raise my children? Miguel, I insist you do your job and get back to the restaurant. You two, policia, go do your jobs. And you two boys, we are going to spend some time visiting Jesus. If your father could only see you." Miguel gave Juan and Diego each a gentle but still macho hug. "Be well, brothers. I'll be around to check on you later. Come, Luis." "Hang in there, brothers." Luis gave an equally macho hug to his brothers. "You too," said Mama. "Give me a few minutes alone with my boys. Miss Martinez." "I said for you to give me a few minutes with my sons." "Yes, ma'am." As the officers left the room, Carmen Martinez gave her sons a look that put the fear that only a mother could instill into the hearts of both men. Both men looked at each other and both pressed the button on morphine drip.
Chris?